Okay, so just welcome everyone. Just let me work out how I do this. Hello. Yes, here we go. All right, welcome people watching and people watching a little bit later. Just let me give an introduction, guys, before we get started. So this is the first in hopefully a series of kind of weekly conversations with some interesting people to really give you learners some practice listening to just a real English conversation. I'm sure if you've ever seen my account or you've ever seen Alex's account, who I'll introduce in a second, we're not really those type of teachers who, try and teach, vocabulary about fruit or dogs and cats and things like that, because I don't know if that's very useful. So really what we try and do is give some of the more complex stuff and just some of the stuff we actually use in the language. So that's something we're both trying to do. So this is first episode of something that hopefully we'll have a few different guests rotating every week, and I'm sure Alex has got a few ideas for what she's going to do for her account. So without further ado, we have Alex here from Peasy Court Anglais. How are you, Alex?
Hi, everyone. I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. So I wanted to bring you on for the first episode because you're relatively new to Instagram with your teaching page, is that right? And I really wanted to find out a little bit about what your thinking was for creating an Instagram page, what you hope to achieve from that, and also what followers can expect as well from you.
Right. Well, I think, like you were just saying, I noticed your page was a little bit similar, it seems, in what I kind of want to get out of this experience. Yeah, so vocabulary, and not just vocabulary that you can show a picture of, and this is a pillow. It's There are words that you really need to use that you can't necessarily figure out on your own, and that really need context and that have nuances. So that's my idea for the vocab part, at least. But obviously, I would, I'm new, I'm kind of just evolving as I go, and I do have more planned in terms of classes I'd like to give online eventually, and a website that I'm growing. I just really want to create as many opportunities as possible for French or anyone else. I'm based in France, so those are kind of the main students that I have. But anyone who's learning English, I want them to have as many opportunities as possible to use their English, because right, you really need to use the English to remember it, and because that's how it's useful. That's how we use it, by using it. We don't just memorize it and then forget it like
I think the challenge for any learner is what we call our passive vocabulary, just the words we learn and we know, and if we read them in the newspaper, we'd understand them, or we'd understand it from the context of the sentence, but then moving it into that active vocabulary where you feel confident using it. So that's always the challenge. So hopefully something like this, where people hear regular speech, regular conversation, it might trigger a few things to move into that active vocabulary. So yeah, we've got a few questions lined up, some kind of interesting stuff. Recently, I've been going through with my students, be used to and get used to. Okay, remember students, be used to is like something's normal for you. For example, now, because I've lived in France for about 7 years, I am used to driving on the right side of the road because I'm from Britain and we drive on the left. So when I first came, I wasn't used to driving on the right, or I wasn't used to it. I got used to it. So to get used to something is like this process of something becoming normal. you've been in France for 4 years, Alex. Was there anything that you had to get used to when you first came?
Well, I really like your example because that's a very apparent one. I feel like mine are maybe less apparent. Let's see.
Oh, I guess, I mean, you're from America, right? You use this
Yeah.
like stupid measurement system of everything that no one else uses. So, telling people it's 90 degrees doesn't really
Yes,
work in
okay,
Europe,
yes,
right?
that's a great example. So I have gotten used to Celsius now, but actually that
Mhm.
was quite recently. I still used Fahrenheit on my phone.
Oh, right. Okay. So, I've completely forgot. I talked to my sister and she mentions something in a imperial measurement, and I say, "What's that in metric?" Like I fully embraced the metric system. Also, because you've been here for a few years and I've watched a couple of your videos, you speak French really well. Tell us about that journey. How much did you speak when you first arrived in France? How much practice did you get? Did you have some kind of method for learning?
Um, yeah, so when I came 4 years ago, I already spoke French pretty well. I was kind
Hmm.
of a French nerd in high school. So
Hmm.
in the US, we often start learning languages in high school.
Hmm.
And I just had the great luck of having an amazing French teacher who
Hmm.
made learning French really fun. And yeah, I kind of just French was kind of became my thing just because it was fun and not necessarily because I saw a reason for it right away. But then
Hmm.
I did start to see a reason. In my family, we hosted exchange students, some French
Hmm.
exchange students. So they were with my family, and then they went back to France. And so I started exchanging with them in French. And I thought that was so cool to be able to, yeah, it just opened all these doors of communication for me.
Because
And
I
then I
guess, right,
continued.
you're from Portland, right, which is kind of like the northwest of the United States, and
Yeah, from near
I
Portland.
guess it's a little bit different from some other places because I imagine if you're in Florida or if you're in Texas, California, you hear something like Spanish quite a lot
Mhm.
in those areas just because of the makeup of those areas. But I guess in Portland, it's quite monolingual.
Yes, it's pretty monolingual for sure. I mean, I definitely heard some Spanish, but
Hmm.
and so Spanish, it would have been the logical language for me to take, and it was
Hmm.
actually. I started with Spanish, but it just the teacher didn't speak to me the way that a French teacher did. So that's really why I switched. There wasn't any
So,
really reason.
what tips would you give for anybody looking to get into learning French, or maybe they've already started and they want to move up a little bit? Is there any resource? Are there any resources, any tips you would give someone?
Um, Honestly, I think I'm this is strange, but since learning French came to me so naturally with in terms of my experience with the exchange students, and then I ended up studying abroad in France.
Hmm.
Um, I actually, since I'm an English teacher, I feel like I I have more tips about learning English than learning French.
Okay,
But
we'll get
with
to some of the
any
tips for
language,
learning English in
yeah,
a while.
I
Um,
mean, with French, I could just say that make it, well, with any language, make it something that's interesting to you. If you're interested
mhm.
in sports, then start watching videos on YouTube in that language that talk about sports.
No,
So,
it's terrible. I watch American football a lot, and I cannot watch it in French because it's awful. So
it's
maybe if
awful.
it's
Why is it awful?
because it's like they
Maybe.
mispronounce every player's name, and then they say, okay, it's like third and 10, but then they go 10, that means like 6.8 meters, and they
Oh,
like
yeah.
translate everything and they
Sports is
explain
not
things like
maybe a
that.
good example then.
Yeah,
Kicking,
but
you know.
kind of football, or European soccer as you'd call it, or football, maybe something like that could be quite good. um I wanted to talk a little bit about Portland as well because
Sure.
it's got a reputation as a pretty alternative city. I remember reading a book way back by Chuck, what's he called, Painuk. He's the guy who wrote Fight Club, and he wrote a book about Portland as well, like this kind of alternative tourist guide because he's from Portland. That was quite interesting. And then I remember reading once, because I think you have a pretty good soccer team in Portland, and I remember reading you can buy tofu burgers at the concession stand, which is completely not normal for any other stadium I've ever been to. So yeah, it's got kind of a bit of a different reputation. Tell us about Portland.
So I actually haven't spent a lot of time in Portland. I'm from a city that's an hour and a half south of there. It's a smaller city. So I actually, for example, when I was in high school, I was kind of in the countryside, and I would sometimes not my students, my classmates, some of them would come to school and they would come by tractor and park their tractor in the parking lot.
Oh wow!
But Oregon in general can be pretty alternative, yes, and I definitely had some of those vibes as well.
And do you manage to get home often, or you're fully living the French experience?
I've been home every summer, but this summer, this year, travel hasn't been a good idea. So, yeah.
Maybe a good opportunity to explore France a little bit as well. Have you explored France quite a lot in the years you've been here, and especially this year?
Well, this year, instead of traveling farther, I did do a little bike trip in France. So it was actually
cool.
That's maybe the alternative Oregonian side in me, but yeah, it was actually biking and camping. So it was from here. I'm near Geneva, not almost to Lyon, but almost to Lyon. And so that was a great experience, being out in nature and getting a change of environment without necessarily having to go a long ways and seeing lots of
I think it's important, especially after everybody was stuck at home for kind of 2 or 3 months. It's important to, go outside a little bit more.
Definitely.
Did you start anything new this year? Lots of Instagram posts, people cooking banana bread and learning to play instruments and things. Did you start anything?
Yes, well, I mean, I started this Instagram account. I I mean, there's always the little things like, yes, I did learn how to make bread. But yeah, I decided, a lot of people kind of thought about what they really wanted, and kind of side passions and projects. And so I am a newbie in terms of technology, but I definitely have been wanting to get more into that. So Instagram, well, I was on Instagram before, but not professionally. This is more.
Oh, you were just taking photos of meals in restaurants and things.
Yes, yes. And yeah, so I actually am in the middle of, this year I started creating, and I'm very, very close to finishing a website that is dedicated to English learning. So it will be a blog. There will be a forum for other English learners to interact and exchange about any questions that I have or that they have. And yeah, and eventually I'd like to make available classes there. So yes, certainly I've started new things.
Sounds great, guys. We're going to put the link for Alex's page in the comments. You should definitely follow. We've got a question in the comments. Where are you living in France? I am living in Paris. And Alex, where are you living?
So I'm living in Annecy. Yep, just south of Geneva in the mountains.
Have you always been there during your time in France?
Yes, since I arrived 4 years ago. I've been in Annecy, but I have spent time. I spent a year in Clermont-Ferrand.
One of my students will be very jealous because her favorite place in the world is Annecy. So I want to talk a little bit now about teaching English. So how did you get involved in teaching English?
Well, I could just say very quickly that I got involved in teaching in general because, as I mentioned before, how great of a learning experience I had with languages and just in
Hmm.
general. In college, I started having more teacher-like roles, and then
Hmm.
I kind of had a not a switch, but a realization in my head that I did want to be really a greater. I wanted to be a part of the teaching in terms of yeah, being actually a teacher. So I came to France as a teacher's assistant in English
Hmm.
and made contacts, and I guess the rest is history.
I think every teacher has a different style, and everybody kind of has some things they're great at, some things they kind of want to work on and improve. What's your style as a teacher?
Well, I maybe that's my American side as well, but I really try to be as positive as possible because there is no need and it's not at all helpful to be saying you're not speaking well enough, you're this was bad. Of course, I'll give corrections, but yeah, it's I just hope that everyone can be as comfortable as possible to be speaking as much and practicing as much as possible. And then I guess I can also say that right now in Annecy, I actually am teaching partially in a kindergarten school. So
Mm.
well, actually two to 6 year olds. And I thought that that was going to be a challenge, but not necessarily interesting in terms of my teaching for in general. But it
Hmm.
actually has been very helpful. The realizations that I've had teaching little kids has made me have been very very helpful for me teaching adults. Actually, it's not just little kids who need to interact with the language and who need to play games and have fun learning a language. So I really have been trying to take that aspect of my teaching
Okay,
to
so yeah,
all
that's
my
one of the
students.
questions, and we've got a couple of questions in the comments. One of them, where am I from? I am not American. Whoever asked if I'm American, I am English. I'm from Manchester in England. And another question was, what's the best way to teach kids? I, before I moved to France, I lived in South Korea, and I taught kids when I was in South Korea. And I don't know which is more difficult. I think now I prefer teaching adults because with adults you can just have a conversation and things can flow quite easily. But with kids, it's all about capturing their attention, I think. So nothing for too long. Kids cannot concentrate for 20 minutes on something. So lots of games, lots of songs. It's almost like you're trying to deceive them that they're not actually learning something. They're just having fun, and then you try
Right.
and sneak in some learning as well. So that's probably the tips I would give, and lots of energy as well. I think that's really important when, especially when you're teaching young kids, just that enthusiasm you have for something. It's really infectious, and people really kind of they bounce that energy bounces off people, I'd say. I also wanted to talk about teaching French people because that's kind of your main area, and probably the majority of your students are French speakers. Um, what are some of the big or the common mistakes that you hear in from French speakers?
Um, mm, so as a category of mistakes, I would say, well, not even mistakes, but areas where French people may have more difficulty. I
Hmm.
would say anything in terms of modal verbs, auxiliary verbs, helping verbs,
Hmm.
um, making questions. I'm not sure why, but it's just not necessarily, well, I do know why. It's just not the same thing. And it's just not natural. So yeah, just I actually that is going to be my first class that I'm going to
All right. Okay.
have available online very soon, hopefully. Um, so yeah, there's that. And then
I think a couple other things that stick out for me are,
mhm.
let me think. Yeah, modal verbs is a good one because
Mhm.
remember, everybody, after a modal verb, before the next verb, there's never a to. I should to go to the doctor. No, absolutely not.
Right.
I should go to the doctor. I also find that there are just some things that exist in English that just don't really exist in French. And probably one of the big ones is that difference between the simple past tense and the present perfect tense. So like, you know, I drank a coffee, I have drunk a coffee. And
definitely.
It's all, I'm going to put a link for my YouTube because I made a video about it on my YouTube, guys, so you can check it out. But the main difference is like, is there a link with the present? Because if there's a link with the present, and what that means is like the action's not finished yet, or the time period's not finished, we're going to use that present perfect tense. So, you know, today I have drunk 3 cups of coffee. Like, even if I have no coffee now, but today is not finished. So like I could drink another one later, whereas yesterday is like definitely in the past, it's definitely finished. So I would say I drank 2 cups of coffee yesterday. So I always find that's a fairly big one. The classic is do and make. I always hit do and make. That's kind of a big one. What else do it? Say and tell. Remember, say, and there's like no destination person after we say. So John said he hates his job. Like, he's just telling anybody. Like, it doesn't really matter. John told me he hates his job. Okay, tell plus destination. Tell John, tell just Sally, tell me, tell you, tell us, right? So there's always a destination after it. Probably one of the areas as a teacher that I maybe need to focus on. I'm pretty good at grammar. I'm really good at conversation, but maybe pronunciation is something I could probably work on a little bit better. Would you have any tips for French people in terms of pronunciation?
For them to work on their pronunciation?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is not an area that I concentrate on very much either. For me, well, maybe that's me trying to reassure myself about my French pronunciation, but for me, if they can...
Oh, you have a pretty good pronunciation's not bad.
Well, thank you, but as long as if you can be understood, then that's great. But I have seen recently, now that I'm following more English teachers online, that a technique could be, I forget, there's a specific way to say this, but it's you literally just listen to a native English speaker say a sentence, and then you press pause, and then you repeat it. You repeat it exactly how they said it, and not necessarily how you would read it. And then
a couple of things I do.
Yeah.
One, I would always say, just speak slower. I think sometimes people have an idea that speaking quickly equals speaking well or pronouncing things well, and it's absolutely not true. Sometimes if you slow it down a little bit, hey, Eric, I just saw you came in into the chat. Hey, so if you speak a little bit slower, that's going to be really good because, one, you're going to pronounce those words better. And second, I think it gives your brain a little bit more time to kind of think of the next word as well. So that's kind of good. Also, something I did for years in French was for 10 minutes a day, I would just pick a book that I had in my house and I would read 2 pages of it out loud. And it's almost like this muscle training for your mouth. So it's just practice, practice, practice. There was a question a little bit before about future lives. Now, I know for me personally, I'm planning probably once a week to do a live like this, which I'll announce. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do it on Tuesday evenings every week, but I will be able to announce that. And you don't always have to watch it live. You can watch it later as well. Alex, what can people expect from you?
Yes, I just saw that question. I would love to do more lives. Of course, you're the first person to kind of introduce the idea to me, but I think it's really great, like you said, for listening comprehension and also just to talk about specific issues.
I think what I want to get on, I think what I've kind of envisioned for myself is just getting some interesting people on for a chat, not necessarily another teacher, not even talking about language every week. You know, I've got one friend who is training for a triathlon. He's really into fitness. I've got another person who, you know, works in the tourist industry, and that's obviously very affected this year. So a few different people, probably rotating. And I think it would be a really good opportunity for my students. Someone had a question about the 2 different TH sounds, for example, this and thing. I am going to save that because I am going to make a video about that this week. So follow. It's going to be a good motivation for you to do that. And also, just before we finish, time is flying. Tell us a little bit about what students can expect from you in the next few weeks.
Okay, yeah, in the next few weeks, I'll be continuing to do my word of the week. I think that's a good rhythm for me, honestly, since I have a few other things going on. But I'm going to be trying to continue to put posts of that word in a contest, sorry, not in a contest, in context, and then continue to do stories with examples. I haven't done a fed up story of why I'm fed up this week, but I'm sure I'll do that soon. And yeah, so I don't know if it'll be this week. I really hope so, but I will be launching my new course on modal verbs and questions. And I actually will be looking for people who are going to take it at a reduced price and give me feedback and see how I can make it as the best as possible and the most useful as possible. So that's what I have.
I think it's a good strategy. I started teaching online about 4 years ago, and I have 2 students who are still with me from 4 years. They've taken 1 lesson a week for kind of 4 years. I mean, it's more their hobby now. They speak English really well. Great teacher. But I still give them that kind of early price that I had. And sometimes you got to start low and move it up a little bit. Quelqu'un a dit dans les commentaires, Eric, tu m'as dit, Richard, tu parles trop vite. Je vais expliquer demain quand nous avons un cours d'anglais demain. Donc, je vais expliquer. All right, great. Very good. Very happy. Alex, is there anything you want to add?
No, I'm just so glad to have talked to you.
Great. Well, I'd definitely love to get you back in like a month or so and have another chat. And if you set something up, if you want to invite me, I'll be more than happy to come on your live. And guys, keep watching out because there's regular videos from both of us explaining things. A little bit of a different style as well. Alex more kind of focuses on one word and goes into deep detail with it. I do these kind of little things as well. Check out the accounts and things, and have a good week, everybody. Okay, just keep an eye out for the next announcement. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.